Game 7.
Audience members. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. I'd like to talk to you guys about the playoff run. The Capitals ended their 40-year Stanley Cup drought and finally won a championship. This championship meant a lot to this city, and it was really important that the Capitals finally were able to clinch the Stanley Cup. They've had a really strong team with players like Alexander Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom, who are known around the NHL as being one of the best players. Alexander Ovechkin, though, has always had a name on the back of his jersey that said, one of the greatest players ever that's never won a championship until this year. Braden Holtby, who's been one of the best goalies in the NHL, had one of his worst regular seasons ever, but the Capitals were still able to push through it and reach the playoffs for the 10th time in 11 seasons. The Capitals started off the playoffs with a really hard series against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They started down 2-0 and were able to rally back and win 4 games and win the series 4-2. Their next series was against the Penguins in the conference semifinals, who had historically beaten the Capitals and ended their playoff runs numerous times in past years. They finally were able to break their drought and beat the Penguins in the conference semifinal for the first time in over 24 seasons and make it to the Stanley Cup final and make it to the conference final for the first time in 20 seasons. Their Stanley Cup final was right in view, and they really, really, really wanted this, and DC wanted it too, since DC had not won a championship in over 40 years in any of the major sports in America. The Capitals played against the Tampa Bay Lightning in their final series before the Stanley Cup, where they were up 2-0 to start the series, and everyone was feeling very confident, and then ended up losing 3 straight games to go back to 3-2 and had everyone feeling very nervous, where we all thought it was going to be another one of the Capitals' classic playoff runs where they drop, where they look like they're going to win, they're one of the best teams in the NHL, and then they fall out in the playoffs. But they actually were able to rally back and beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in 7 games and ended up pushing into the Stanley Cup final for the first time in over 20 seasons. The Capitals ended up playing the Vegas Golden Knights, who almost every single person in the entire country was rooting for. This was a new expansion team that had just been brought up, and there had never been any decent, good expansion teams in the NHL or in any major sport that had done well in their first season. The Vegas Golden Knights were able to make the playoffs, be one of the best teams in the NHL, and make the final. They were really close. They played really hard and they competed really well, but the Capitals, it was just their year. The Capitals faced them in 5 games and won in the Game 5 decisive. That was 4-3, where they ended up being 3-3 until 7 minutes in the third period, where Lars Eller, one of their third-line centers, scored a goal that put them over the top. This was a very big championship for the DC area. Many teams in the DC area have had very big struggles in playoff past experiences. The Wizards have not been to an NBA playoffs or an NBA championship in a very, very long time. The Capitals have hosted really good teams, but have never been able to push through. The same thing with the Nationals and the same thing with the Redskins. All good teams, but never able to make it to the playoffs or never able to actually make a run. This was a really big thing for me. The Capitals are a team that I've grown up watching and has been instrumental in my life, games that I've gone to, and a team that I'm a very big fan of. So this win was really big for me, and it was really cool to see in a city that we're all so close to. Thank you all for being here.
Good.
Very good. Very good.